Welcome into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube and KSL NewsRadio, your legacy home of the Cougars. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper, on this Thursday edition of the program as we count down the days until BYU versus Texas Tech, a top 10 clash in the Big 12 with college football playoff implications. And our top story of the day, who's in, who's out. Let's go over it right now here on Cougar Tracks.
The top story of the day. The biggest story in the world of BYU sports right here on Cougar Tracks.
It's a question everyone's asking. Who's going to be playing in this game for BYU? And we have some answers as the first initial player availability report was released on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Mountain Time, right after BYU football practice concluded a few hours after that. And the player availability report looks as such for BYU. Sione Moa, running back, cornerback Marcus McKenzie, and defensive tackle Anisi Purcell. All three of those guys are out. And Purcell is noteworthy. We knew that earlier in the week when he was removed from the depth chart. And that's noteworthy because he was a guy that had a sack in the Iowa State game, been playing some really good football. That's a noteworthy absence. In regards to running back LJ Martin, he is listed as probable. LJ is expected to be good to go for this game, which is huge for BYU, getting LJ Martin back into the backfield after suffering an injury in that Iowa State game. Now, Aaron Roderick noted this week they're not sure what percentage LJ is going to be playing at, but he is going to play. And I think it's important for LJ Martin to be playing for BYU because he's such a critical piece to this team, and he has the ability to carry BYU on his back. He's got that ability, and going up against one of the best rush defenses in college football, it's critical to have LJ Martin for BYU in this game. Other players on the availability report for BYU, Tommy Parasis is doubtful. He continues to deal with a foot injury, so the week one starting nickel, Tommy Parasis, he's doubtful for this game. Also probable, Raider Mooney, he's going to play. He's back into the lineup. Second unit, it's going to be Falatau Satuala and Tanner Wall as the starting safeties. And then Raider Mooney will back up Tanner Wall. And then wide receiver JoJo Phillips makes his return. And he's been practicing since about the Arizona week. So it's been a while now for JoJo, and it's been a slow build getting him back up to speed, but he's expected to go against Texas Tech, which is huge because I've said this all along throughout the offseason or throughout the season. JoJo, to me, looked like the guy that was the number one target for Bear Bachmeier in fall camp, and that reflected as such in the first couple of games. Remember that Stanford game when he goes down, he had 8 targets. Bear was targeting him often in those games, and now JoJo returns to the lineup. I think that's a huge boost for BYU. On the Texas Tech side of things, nothing that's shocking. I think it's kind of expected what we saw from Texas Tech in this player availability report. The Red Raiders have defensive tackle Skylar Gill-Howard, who was their starting defensive tackle. He suffered an ankle injury back around the Kansas game, and he's been out since then. Also, Hunter Zambrano, a rotational right tackle. He's been out since non-conference play, so that's no surprise. Of note for Texas Tech was Amir Boyd, their starting cornerback last week against Kansas State. He's listed as questionable, so that might be one to monitor. He has 1 interception this season, 2 pass deflections. And then their quarterback, Baron Morton, remember, if you go back to the Kansas game a few weeks back, he's re-injured a right knee, suffered a right knee injury, and that caused him to miss the Arizona State game. He played last week against Kansas State and led the Red Raiders to a victory. He was listed on the availability report as probable. He's going to play, but something to keep in mind there. Also of note, when it comes to season-ending injuries in the Big 12, it's once they're reported once, they don't have to be listed every single week after that. I know there were some questions about the status of linebacker Che Bryant Strother for BYU. He no longer has to be on the availability report. He's got a season-ending injury, and he is expected to be back next season, 2026, for BYU football. Kalani talked about that last week. But, yeah, if a player is out for the season, the program makes an official report to the conference office, and that player will be marked out for at least one game and then will not appear on further player availability reports. That's from the Big 12 Conference. So something to keep in mind there when you're wondering, did this player go off the availability report? Is he coming back? Not necessarily there. That just means, he's probably done for the year. But of note, though, when it comes to these availability reports, BYU didn't have any linebackers appear on the availability report, and I think that's a good sign because Jack Kelly was banged up. Isaiah Glasker was banged up. Sialia Sarah was banged up. Jay Hill said this group is pretty healthy.
Well, I think they're healthier than they've been for the last 3 or 4 weeks, which is huge for us. I don't know that they're 100% full go, but I don't know that anybody at this stage of the season is 100%. So I would say better than they've been, but not like they were the first game of the season.
That's big, though, because Sialia Sarah, remember, he went out with what looked to be an arm injury against Iowa State. He's back into the lineup. Jack Kelly, dealing with that shoulder injury that he suffered against West Virginia. He didn't look to be anywhere close to 100%. I'll be curious to see how Jack looks this week against Texas Tech. And then Glasker's been banged up, too, and I think that's kind of prevented him from being the elite player that he is at times. He's still outstanding. And this matchup between BYU and Texas Tech has some of the best linebackers, I believe, in college football this season. But when those guys are healthier than what they've been in recent weeks, that's promising for BYU because all three of those guys, Kelly, Glasker, Acera, they are impact players, star players that on any given play could be the best player on the field. So to have those guys trending up in terms of health and not even on this availability report and expected to go, I think that's a huge development for this BYU football team. But by all accounts, when you look at, where that bye week landed last week, it was probably the perfect spot because coming out of that Iowa State game, it felt like BYU was a beaten up team and they were crawling to the bye week, and you thought this Texas Tech game looming, that could be really concerning for BYU, but relatively healthy, all things considered, I think, for this BYU team, and that's a promising sign because when you get to these big games where it's a top 10 clash, first ever top 10 football game in BYU football history, you want to have the key guys. You want the Jack Kellys. You want the Isaiah Glaskers. You want the LJ Martins out there to play because then you don't have that what if. What if BYU had him in the lineup? Could they have taken down Texas Tech? If it's a close game and you wonder, that superstar wasn't in the game, that, for the most part, goes out the door here. I do think the Purcell absence will be noteworthy, but still, I think that BYU is in a pretty good spot, and same with Texas Tech, too. Nothing shocking on that availability report coming out of this. And I will say, too, with Texas Tech, when it comes to availability reports, this topic of availability reports has been a little bit controversial where some teams, it's been accused that they don't take it seriously. I'll give Texas Tech their props. Last year, Joey McGuire got ahead of this. He had his own availability reports for his program because he didn't want to have to answer the questions. He just put it all out there. So I think both of these programs, BYU and Texas Tech, are pretty transparent on these. So I think that just makes for a fun, exciting, and builds the excitement of this matchup up between the Cougs and the Red Raiders, which kicks off on Saturday at 10 a.m. in Lubbock. Extended pregame begins at 7 a.m., so you can have College Game Day on, maybe have the audio of extended pregame with me and Kyle Ireland from Lubbock, Texas. So it's going to be a good one between the Cougs and the Red Raiders. Let's take a break. We'll get to more BYU football talk as you'll hear more from Aaron Roderick and Jay Hill, the coordinators for BYU around the corner. It's Cougar Tracks here on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports YouTube page. Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube. Every day, subscribe to the podcast. It comes to you daily with new BYU sports talk every single day to get your Cougar sports fix. And audio, video, however you're watching or listening. Appreciate you for being on board. Right now, it's Thursday, so let's get to the Big 12 picks.
Big 12 picks. In the deepest conference in America, anything can happen. Mitch tries to tell you what will happen next. It's his Big 12 picks. Big 12 picks.
It's a pretty light week in the Big 12 outside of BYU and Texas Tech. And, of course, I'll give you my BYU-Texas Tech pick tomorrow on Friday here on Cougar Tracks. So outside of BYU-Texas Tech, only 4 games on the slate this week. 6 teams in the Big 12 Conference are on a bye. So pretty light. Every game is going to be done by around 5 p.m. Mountain Time this week. The latest kick time in the Big 12 is 1:30 p.m., so no Big 12 after dark. Pretty light week around the conference. The first game that I'm going to get to here on the slate for Week 11, Houston at UCF, Friday night, 6 p.m. on FS1. Houston coming off that shocking loss to West Virginia. I was stunned that happened. I couldn't believe it, that Houston lost that game, and then to pair up the loss with the fact that they had no one in the stands. It was a bad look, I thought, for Houston. Still, I like this Houston team with Willie Fritz and Connor Wegman at quarterback. I think they bounce back and take down UCF at the Bounce House. UCF, I don't think is a very good football team. I think they've shown moments where they've been better in year one and further ahead than maybe expectations would be placed on them going into the first season under Scott Frost. They've been good at home, but to only have 3 points last week against a bad Baylor defense, that was a bad look. First time UCF didn't score a touchdown in a game since 2005. They are not trending in the right direction. I'm going to go with Houston to win on the road in some Friday night action in the Big 12. On the Saturday slate, Colorado at West Virginia, 10 a.m. on TNT. I don't expect any Cougar fan to be watching this game or Texas Tech fan, but if you are a Buffs fan or a Mountaineers fan, you're going to probably be watching this one. I can't believe I'm saying this because this Colorado team looks like they've given up on the season. I'm going to go with the Buffs because they have a quarterback change going to Juju Lewis. And I loved Coach Prime's explanation as to why they are going to Juju Lewis at quarterback. He just said common sense. Caden Salter has not worked out, common sense. And I love that from Coach Prime. This is their last chance, though. I mean, if they can't get anything here with a new quarterback change, this season could be a complete lost season. I'm going to go with the Buffs on the road because of Juju, but I have zero confidence in that. On the flip side, West Virginia, Scotty Fox at quarterback was a bright spot in their win over Houston. Again, I'm going to go with the Buffs here, but I do not feel confident at all about that pick. Kansas at Arizona, 1:30 p.m. on ESPN2. I will go with Arizona. They hammered Colorado last week. You know, Arizona's a pretty good football team when you look at it. The Wildcats, they hung tough with Houston. They hung tough with BYU. It's a pretty good football team under Brent Brennan in year 2. I think what you've seen from Arizona is that they've clearly made progress in year 2 because even though he only coached one season last year, Brent Brennan, I kind of wondered if he was going to be on the hot seat coming into this year. And I think they've made progress. And Noah Fafita is still only a junior. If they can finish strong this year, maybe get some momentum going into the offseason, senior campaign for Fafita, hey, Arizona could be a trendy team next year. I really like what Arizona's been doing this year. I mean, we saw it firsthand with BYU in Arizona. The Wildcats play some pretty good football, so I'm going to go with Arizona to win comfortably over a Kansas team that I just haven't been impressed with at all this season. They were kind of struggling last week against Oklahoma State. It was only 10-7 at the half until they pulled away, but I think Kansas is getting back to the bottom of the Big 12 like they typically were at for many years in this conference. And then the final game of the day, I think a lot of Cougar fans will have interest in this one. Iowa State at TCU. BYU will play TCU next week, 8:15 p.m. on ESPN, a late-night game in Provo. Iowa State looking to avoid a 5th consecutive loss. They cannot get right. They are on a 4-game skid. last game before another bye week, the third bye week for Iowa State this season. It's in Fort Worth. I'm going to go with TCU, and quietly, TCU's just 6-2, kind of hovering around, only 2 losses in Big 12 play, with a big game against BYU coming up. Maybe they could have some say in this Big 12 championship game race, depending on how things shake out. But I'm going to go with the Horned Frogs to get a win. And look, if they go 7-2, are they potentially knocking on the door of the college football playoff rankings? I think there's a case to be had. If you're a 7-2 power conference team, I think that's worthy of being in the top 25. So maybe could be another top 25 matchup next week in Provo. If TCU beats Iowa State, maybe BYU could be hosting another ranked squad next week out in Provo. But that's my picks for the Big 12. Again, it's a light schedule around the Big 12 conference. I'll have my BYU pick coming up tomorrow between the Cougs and the Red Raiders. Let's take our final timeout. On the other side, you'll hear from Aaron Roderick and Jay Hill on the program. Some interesting clips from the coordinators of BYU in preparation for this top 10 clash against Texas Tech. It's Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube page. Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports YouTube page. Mitch Harper with you. BYU and Texas Tech coverage begins on Saturday at 7 a.m. from Lubbock. And I'm really intrigued by this game in so many different ways. I mean, the whole off-the-field theatrics and kind of the build-up, the anticipation. I love what Joey McGuire has been saying this week, where he's embracing the hype and the expectations, telling College Game Day, you got unlimited access. We're going to embrace it. You're going to be around the building. Just embrace it. I like that approach from Texas Tech because they're probably going to be loose. And I think for BYU, they're an underdog. They're going to be loose too. I think these are going to be two teams. They're going to play a really good brand of football in this game. That's what I hope for. I think when you get these big games, you want it to be a well-executed game. You don't want it to be sloppy. You don't want it to be tight. Teams are throwing picks, turnovers. You want this to be a really good football game. And I know you don't want to get caught up in the whole Big 12 conference pride thing, but this is a showcase opportunity for the Big 12. This is much bigger than Utah-Cincinnati was last week. This is an early morning kick. A lot of the nation's going to be watching, and when you have single digits next to your name, you get some casuals to say, well, are they really the 7th best team in the country? Are they really the 8th best team in the country? I think you're going to get a big audience for this game. Now, the YouTube TV piece, where they don't have ABC and ESPN, maybe you lose some of that, obviously. But I think this is going to be an audience that's going to be maybe 4 or 5 million people watching BYU and Texas Tech. This could be a massive window, and I think you want to play a clean game. And both teams, I think, come into this contest feeling pretty confident. For BYU, they know they can win football games regardless of the setting. But this is, to me, the toughest opponent BYU has faced since they've been in the Big 12. And BYU offensive coordinator Aaron Roderick, when discussing the Texas Tech defense, he even indicated that that's kind of the viewpoint that he has as well. This was Roderick on Texas Tech's defense and the tough test that they pose.
This is the best defense we've played probably since Texas in 2023. I'd say they're right up there with those guys. This D-line they're freaks, and they're really good players. Their linebackers are great. Everybody knows that. Good secondary. They have no personnel weaknesses. They have a very good scheme, very well coached. I have a lot of respect for their defensive coordinator. Yeah, they're good. They don't really have any weaknesses, and they get turnovers, man. They strip the ball as well as any team I've ever seen.
High praise from Aaron Roderick for Texas Tech's defense, and he's right. I mean, Jacob Rodriguez is among the best in college football. It's so unique what he does, where he's got a knack, like it's his identity, where he forces fumbles. And then you got Romello Height, you got David Bailey, you got Lee Hunter in the middle, in the interior of that defense. They are a star-studded team. Even some of the transfers from like North Dakota State, they've been all studs. I mean, that's the thing about Texas Tech, was that they assembled a lot of transfers, and I think you feel, oh, it's a transactional team, not going to be much unity, team cohesion, but they were all top-end guys, all conference performers, whether it was FCS or FBS. It's a talented football team, and I'm really impressed with the way that they've built their program and their roster. I think one of the things that's interesting, though, about Texas Tech is does this stage feel too big for them? Whereas BYU, say what you will, BYU is used to this undefeated in November piece, big games, high stakes. Last year they were number 6 in the playoff, then they lost to Kansas, and that was the moment where maybe the stage was a little bit too big for them. Now I feel like BYU's kind of used to this. Now a freshman quarterback, he's not used to this in Bear Bachmeier, but even Aaron Roderick is pretty confident in his QB. And look, he acknowledges that Bear, it's going to be tough against Texas Tech, but he feels pretty good about his true freshman signal caller.
Just the same. I mean, each week he improves a little bit, and that's what we're looking for. And as the challenges get more difficult, you need him to just keep finding incremental ways to get a little bit better each game. He has exceeded my expectations multiple times this year already, and these guys are good. I mean, this could be a game where maybe he struggles a little bit for part of the game or whatever, but I think that he has the character to battle through, and really looking forward to seeing how he does in this environment.
I'm really curious to see if Bear can have the success running the football up the middle as he's been known to have success running this year. Because, again, the interior of Texas Tech's defensive line with a guy like Lee Hunter, they are excellent in stopping the run. They're the number 1 rush defense in college football for a reason because they do not let much go up the middle. And that's where Bear has feasted. You think back to that 22-yard touchdown run against Utah, which was iconic and one of the great plays, I think, in the history of the BYU-Utah rivalry. Can he get that sort of success up the middle, up the heart of Texas Tech's defense? I'm really curious to see that because with still the questions about LJ Martin and how he's going to be able to perform, not being at 100%, you've got to have Bear and his ability to run the football. This could be a game where Bear is running it 15, 20 times. I know that Aaron Roderick said in past weeks they don't want to do that. Think back to the Arizona game, 22 carries for Bear Bachmeier. But this might be a game where you have to do it because you've got to have a capable ground attack and one that keeps Texas Tech on its heels and it keeps their offense off the field too. BYU's got to have some methodical drives that eat up the clock. You do not want this to be a game where you get behind and you become one-dimensional and you're having to throw the football and this thing drags out for a while. You got to be able to run the football, and Bear's got to be key. But I like the fact that Bear has just been so poised this year where I don't think he's going to be rattled by a hostile crowd that's going to be hyped up, biggest game in Lubbock in 17 years. I don't think that's going to faze Bear. And I think that's the reason why, despite being a huge underdog, you have some confidence that he's going to step up and show quite well in this game for BYU. On the flip side, BYU's defense has to be stout. And Jay Hill's talked about that this week. BYU's rush defense, the last 5 games, has allowed more than 150 yards on the ground. They're now going up against a Texas Tech ground attack, which is one of the best in the Big 12, 197.9 yards per game. That's 3rd in the Big 12. And remember, they lost their top running back in fall camp due to an injury, the USC transfer. So it's not like they have their full collection of personnel, and they're still really good. This was Jay Hill on the rush defense and how that's coming along for his BYU defense.
Well, I like where they're at. We're getting more stout each game. I think we're good right now, run and pass. There's so many good things that they are doing. The last 2 games, they've run the ball a little bit against us, but not inside. We've been very stout inside. So I think it all starts with those guys.
It definitely does, and that's where Keanu Tanavasa, John Talmoy-Payau, they've got to come up big for BYU. Saw JT last night in the parking lot outside the student-athlete building. He looks great. And you could tell there was a little bit of a freshness to this BYU team coming out of the bye. And I think that's promising because that was a long grind, 6 straight weeks. And in fact, you wonder if maybe that played a role in the amount of yardage given up on the ground. Now they're fresh. And you do lose Purcell this week, but that's an opportunity for Kirkland and then maybe Kafusi Pofoke in the second unit. But ultimately, Keanu Tanavasa, John Talmoy-Payau in the middle, they got to continue to be stout. And then the edges, Schoonover, they've got to be outstanding in this game. And Logan Latui for BYU in stopping the edges and not letting these guys get outside for Texas Tech. So this is going to be a great game. And we will have more in-depth game preview tomorrow between the Cougs and the Red Raiders, hoping for some College Game Day commentary as well from some of the hosts of College Game Day tomorrow on the show. So stay tuned for that here on Cougar Tracks. But we're going to have you covered for BYU and Texas Tech from Lubbock. So stay tuned here to KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports YouTube page, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a great night, everyone.